Much. Item 13, closeout report for North Avon Road. We should be breaking at 1 and coming back at 2. Depending how quickly we get, we should be able to get through the next 3. Hello.
Afternoon, sorry. A quick introduction.
You may.
North Avon Road was the first street renewal, full curb-to-curb street renewal done since the earthquakes. We undertook, and it was probably 8 years since we'd done a street renewal. It was undertaken as a measure and value contract. Most of our transport projects are. They're a standard form of contract. The measure and value side of the contract allows for clear risk allocation within the contract and a clear risk identification in the contract, so that the contractors aren't taking on the quantity risk, they're taking on the pricing risk. We had 4 areas in this contract where we did get caught. The first was coal tar and unsuitables, so that's where the ground conditions aren't as we expected. What we did do was we went in before we started this contract and we did a significant amount of ball log testing that didn't show up the extent of coal tar that we anticipated. To be honest, that was based on what we'd typically always done with testing for coal tar and for ground conditions. We have since changed that process through a lessons learned process, and we do much more rigorous testing as we've done in new contracts moving forward, like Riccarton Road. We also had an issue down there with down North Avon Road with service strikes. It's probably one of the oldest areas of telco asset in the city. We had a very reasonably unstable asset, so we did have a few issues with cable strikes. We worked through that with the telco companies themselves and got them all resolved. We're a little more rigorous now in assessing that risk before we even start digging. And we also found a lot of archaeological artefacts, which we didn't expect to. We'd done an archaeological survey, and that had said the area was, we'd got an assessment back and it said the area was low risk. So we had moved forward, and it turned out we got, what, Kirsty?
11 boxes of artefacts and a whole lot of tram tracks that no one knew were there.
So there was a...
Where are they now? We talked to the Tramway Society, so they took away the tram tracks. And
what about the other stuff?
The 11 boxes of artefacts are down with underground, overground being processed. So
yeah,
cool.
So that's about where we're at with it. So it did run over budget. It ran over contract, the contract value.
I mean, when I look at this at face value, the final budget was double the initial budget. That's way out.
Yep. And it took.
I mean, the coal tar stuff is interesting. I mean, a few people have spoken to me about that. I mean, $1.5 million, that's a huge number to be out in terms of the consideration of a road that you're renewing, you know, the full curb and channel post-earthquake. You know it's going to be messy. And it seems like we've missed quite, again, compared to some of the other closeout reports where we're still getting the same issues, service strikes, didn't know the ground conditions. And I mean, after a while, you kind of go, really? You know, so, I mean, I understand this was one of the first ones that was done, which is why I picked it, because it's an interesting road. The community had given a lot of feedback on it needing to be done. But it just kind of, you know, doesn't read that well in terms of the preparation that went into it before the original tender.
So we did do ball log testing, but we acknowledged that wasn't enough. But ball log testing is very expensive, and it is noisy, and it is disruptive to the community itself. It's usually done at night. So we've now, since that process, we have engaged with specialist contaminated land testers as well, and we have got them on board at that same time. So For example, when we went up Riccarton Road, we did about 3 or 4 times the testing, but that's hundreds of thousands of dollars before we've even started our contract. So we do a lot more testing now to do that. This was tested it would have been about 2 years prior to us letting this contract. So it was quite a while ago that the testing was done to allow the design to be undertaken.
Can you just explain, because some people might not know, I mean, coal tar, just and how prevalent is it across the city, and what is it? Yeah, what is it? I mean, how do we do the pavements now and all the,
Yeah. So coal tar is and I'm going to have to use really layman's terms, apologies for that. Coal tar is it's a byproduct from the old gasworks. It is a highly carcinogenic product. It is a hydrocarbon-based product, and it was used as a waterproofing agent for the roads. So it was a byproduct. They found a use for it. It waterproofed the roads, and it got they found a use for it and used it. Prior to the earthquakes, we used to actually leave it in place. We used to encapsulate it in place, not take it out or disturb it when we didn't need to. There was a change through it's to do with ECAN and dealing with hazardous substances. The process now requires us to remove it. And that change all happened at about the time, am I right, Kirsty?
Just as we're going to tender on this project, so yeah.
So we would have encapsulated it when we went to tender using our standard processes, and we got told we had to take it out, hence part of the cost, and why we now allow for complete removal of all coal tar, and we allow a much bigger contingency in our contracts and our estimates now.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. One, I mean, again, the whole point of these reports obviously is for us to have some measure of accountability on the budget setting and what you actually turn out, but also as a public record. So it'd be useful to have that explanation in the report, like what is coal tar, and I guess one question is where does it go?
It is taken to either Cape Valley or Green Island. Are the two. Green Island is down in Dunedin, or Cape Valley. Green Island is a way. So it has to be taken to an authorised
Green Island.
site.
That sounds a misnomer, doesn't it?
Sounds a bit like a bad American movie. Yeah.
And it's just put into landfill?
It's put into landfill, yeah. Look, our contractors, and charges are huge, yes. It is a significant charge. A number of our contractors are working with us and with ECAN to try and find other, I want to put in inverted commas, uses, abilities to use this material when we know there's coal tar and it's coal tar contaminated, but it can be diluted, it could be used in other hydrocarbon products, used so that it's not going into landfill and just shifting the problem. So we are working very hard to do that at the moment, but we've got to work with ECAN on that too, and they are working with us. That was the change in the recent.
We couldn't get a variation on it or an extension.
We're working on that, but we've got to work on that, and we've got to have the process for how we're going to manage it, how we're going to know where it is, or dilute it to a point where it's not no longer a problem.
I mean, it's important again because the public needs to know why do these things cost so much?
Yeah.
And why do they cost way more than they used to cost? So. Yep. Regulations, different requirements, these are all adding to the cost of everything. And
encapsulated within those costs, it's not the cost of the coal tar and the disposal of the coal tar is not that raw price. That includes also the traffic management associated with the time, associated to get rid of it, get it out. So our compliance costs have gone up, archaeological being one of them, but our traffic management and health and safety compliance costs have gone up significantly since the earthquakes because of the changes in legislation.
Okay, Mike?
Thanks, Ref. So this obviously was the first renewal post-earthquake. So following that, I'm sure we've done a few more renewals. Are we seeing much difference between the original contract price and the final actual price?
Not now. In fact, the street renewals just around the corner that Kirsty's been involved with on Petrie, Randall, Stapleton's area have all come in well under. We've been able to do more than we expected. you do find the coulter in particular as an issue is more prevalent and more heavily used on arterial routes.
Okay.
Glenn?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is on the coulter. Is it possible to map it by decade or decades? So in terms of anticipating where it might be?
We run a general assumption that unless we've replaced the street and we've taken it out, it's going to be there now.
Okay. And just on the archaeological part,
Yes.
which essentially is about contractor performance, I imagine there aren't too many in the market who do this, but it does say there staff continue to get this advice for projects that have significant excavation involved. Is this advice as in underground, overground, or can you tender for?
We work with underground, overground, and there's another organisation I think, but typically we work with underground.
Because it sounds like that they missed it.
Well, to be fair, the archaeological sites are well mapped and well known, and for example, we know that out the Sumner Way, it's a very high. You've got a very high risk of hitting something quite significant. So. Yeah, that was just, we've learnt now, that's now got on the map as an area that's probably got a bit more
archaeological
interest.
importance.
Yeah.
Are there many others in the market who can do this?
No, it's quite limited. And we've got to work through with, is it Heritage New Zealand?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got to work with companies that are accepted by them as well. So I think there's total 3 that we can work with, companies.
Okay. Yep.
Yanni and then Dion.
Just wanted to clarify, what was the original project budget?
So the original project budget or the original estimate for the contract?
Well, what was the original amount of money that we put on our annual plan or long-term plan?
I've just got the amount that was on there at the end of the project that was on budget. 3.65 was the original the pre-tender estimate before we went out to tender. So it was in a very hot market where the contractors were looking to get work as well. So it came in well under that budget.
Okay, I think we need more work on this. The original on budget was 1.6. For those of us on the committee at the time, we raised concern. We didn't think that was sufficient. We were assured that it could be done for that cost. I find it bizarre that there's no mention of that. This was raised as part of our annual planning processes. So I'm just really concerned that we've got a report that doesn't give the full context of actually the budgeting process, because I'm sort of struggling to understand how we got it so wrong from the 1.6 to double up to the 3, and then it actually costs 6. But this report doesn't show that and doesn't give any reason for that. So can you explain why not?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, generally, we're asking them for the actual project budget.
Yep.
What might have been in an annual plan or long-term plan is not something we've asked for.
But if we don't learn the lesson of how we put money on budget with our communities, it's a pretty fundamental lesson to try and learn so that communities don't have these expectations that things will happen or that we've budgeted properly. Like, how can we have confidence with our community around our budgets if we can't even put a decent approximation of what the cost of a project?
Through the chair, this was the first one.
Yeah, I mean, this was a kind of post-earthquake road rebuild. That's why this project
We're
was
certainly
interesting.
making sure these lessons are built into the estimates moving
Yeah,
forward.
I mean, certainly what I'm seeing now is they're more accurate, but still, you know, it is obviously an issue that we're all grappling with. Dion?
So, just one other question I had was in regards to, was there any consideration of, through this process, there were a number of additional either work happening in the same vicinity or things that the community had wanted around extending it further towards the red zone? Was there any sort of lessons learned around whether we could have got synergy around doing things at the same time as part of one contract versus or one project rather than having several?
Sorry, I don't understand. There was several projects.
Yeah, like
there were issues. Sorry, councillor. There were concerns raised from the community about moving, extending the extent of works from North Parade down towards closer to the river, that work had, and we had that conversation with the community, that work had been completed by skirt. We weren't prepared, we didn't propose to extend work that had been completed. Whether the community agreed with us or not is a different story. We contained that extent and had that conversation with the community board at the time, is my understanding. As far as synergies go, the same contractor that did this work did the work on Medway Street that allowed for a level of savings across, probably realised on the Medway Street project that was done, rather than this one. But they didn't have the disestablishment costs that we would normally have on a contract.
Right, so my understanding too was that the footpath weren't included in this scope.
Footpaths were done on this
Yes,
project,
footpaths
so
were done.
boundary to boundary renewals were completed on this project.
And that was always
Yes.
in there. Okay.
Dion?
Mine's really around who paid for that extra costs, and is this covered under was this a full covered by council, or was it NZTA funded?
There's a level of NZTA funding in there.
And was the extra costs NZTA funded or not?
The NZTA subsidies are claimed off the work that we do against, I can't tell you the detail of it, but yes.
Yeah,
so on all projects, the NZTA subsidies done off the work that we've done.
I mean, what I'm trying to understand is what was the actual cost to council, and what was the actual cost of the other costs that we had come in?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, and I doubt I can probably dig it out. Yes, it'll be messy dig out. But at the time...
They haven't previously funded footpaths.
Yeah.
That's only been a recent thing that they've decided to do.
Yeah.
So you'd really just get the carriageway
Pavement.
would be subject to the normal standard amount of funding, which is we try to get 51%.
Yeah, and there's no other funding
part of the
mechanisms for getting rid of coal tar. I mean, this sounds like it was a change in regulations, and that's probably come from a national policy statement somewhere.
Yep.
Has it come from a national policy statement? So that's a government-imposed
Yeah, I
policy
believe so.
statement that required ECAN to change their rules, which required us to do the work.
Which then affects all of the utility
Wow.
providers. I mean, I know it affects us probably in a bigger way because we're renewing the whole carriageway, but it affects all the utility providers
Yeah.
as well who are digging trenches.
So
They've
there
got
was-
the same requirement to
So
remove.
there's no funding from the central government on this changes, and to, obviously they're trying to clean up the environment, but
Which is why we're working with our contractors to find other ways to deal with this hazardous product.
it's just again another problem. It's just the goalposts are continuously changing at the moment. The other question that I had was the project final status summary. I'm not sure whether amber is a correct way of looking at it. I just wanted to understand why. I mean, I kind of understand, but if you really look at this at face value, the finance was red.
Yes, and it should have been good.
And because, I mean, you can't just say, well, we changed the budget, so it's not as red as it should be.
Yeah. So Kirsty's just acknowledged it should have been read, and I apologise for that.
Okay, can we just make sure that that's
Yep.
tidied up when we do
Yep.
these things, because we need to have accurate
Absolutely.
representation of these. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks very much for that. Have a resolution to receive the information, and moved Mike, seconded Pauline. Any discussion? Yanni?
I think there's a few lessons that have been lost in this that we need to look at, and one is how we do approximations for our budget. So I'd like to have a request to do that and get consideration of that. Because I was one of the councillors that represented this area when we went through this process. I raised concerns that the budget was insufficient, was assured that it was fine. Submitters raised concern that the budget was insufficient, and we were reassured that it was fine, and it clearly wasn't. And it wasn't just once, it was twice. So I think that's a major issue that we need to look at. The other thing that doesn't come through on this is the governance. We actually didn't, I think for this one we struggled to get a quorum at one of the meetings. And so there are some lessons around having boundary roads and joint meetings between boards, which hasn't been highlighted, but I think it is something we do need to think about, just ensuring that we have an efficient use of time. But I do agree that, that this is really important to look at these projects, but I don't think we're getting the full benefit in this particular closeout report because it seems to be absent of the initial decisions that were made to put the money on budget and the quantum, which was significantly less than what was required. So I would like to move that we ask for more information around the full financial approximation of this project from Woe to Go.
Dion?
Yeah, the only comment I want to make is actually I think we as a council need to, in the next term, sit down and have a look at all of these changing regulations that keep coming down to us and actually understanding the financial implications that are coming. Because I don't think the central government has any idea on how much cost they're burdening on cities and regional councils, local councils, without sharing the income that they get for these very matters, such as, you know, taxes on road user charges and all that stuff, because it's just impossible to keep on top of this. You know, the question was asked, why do these things keep costing more? It's because these regulations come in and they change the ball, you know, the goalposts keep changing. So I really would like us as a council, probably in the next term, to actually get a really good handle on this. The water one's another one. There's the national policy statement and the infrastructure that's going to be required around that in urban design, and obviously this one here. So I do want to understand that, and I think that's something we can take away and do, and send it back through Local Government New Zealand and say, I mean, there's been reports on this, but I think we need to start looking at real world examples.
Okay, thanks, Dion. Anyone else? Leanne?
Well, in some ways, I guess I should have spoken before in terms of the need to pick up on what the chair said, and that is to actually get some additional information, you know, sort of publicly available about because what the report does, and the report's very good, I mean, what it does is it highlights the reasons, but it doesn't give the explanation that sits behind those changes. So I would like future project closeout summaries to actually give the reasons as well, and then perhaps even identify how some of those reasons could be anticipated. Because I think Yanni's raised the point about it. I've certainly heard staff say that is how they're doing the assessment of the costs in the future. So I think that you've picked up the concerns that have been raised in this closeout report, and you're not doing that now. So that's good. But again, if we can get that more sort of specifically called out in the reporting and then the consideration of funding for future projects, then it shows that we're actually learning the lessons of each report as we go. But I think if we could add those words requesting future project reports to provide the explanation that sit behind the reasons for the change in the budget, I think that would be useful from a councillor point of view in terms of governance, but also from a public point of view in terms of the real costs faced by councils that we have no control over.
Okay, anyone else? Right, I'll put the motion. All in favour say what? Yeah, that's kind of in there.
There just needs to be an explanation of how 1.6 was arrived at, what it was based on, how it got to 3, and then we obviously know how it got to 6, which is the Closeout issue.
Just a question whether is that sufficiently proactive, because number 2 is still getting the explanations after the fact. Do we want to try and be more proactive? Contingency, tender?
Maybe if 2 just expand a little to provide the explanations for any changes in budgets and how that has been factored into future budgeting arrangements. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're good with that? Yeah, Aaron?
Suggestion made by Councillor Swiggs on giving the list to government of the imposing costs. Where's that at, and when would that come up? Would that be an additional line here, or do we discuss that in the near future? Because there's a whole lot of compliance costs that are coming in that add absolutely nothing to your productivity, but your costs go through the roof. You're still delivering the same road, it just costs twice as much to do it.
I think that's more an issue for LGNZ.
So raise it somewhere else? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for this particular report, but by all means, take it up with the government. Okay, we happy with that? Right, I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Aye, against, that's carried. There we go.